well, I've called this term the central limb. So what do I mean by that? You know, it's an interesting thing. We have 5 cardinal lines in our body. We have the 4 limbs and the spine, all equal length. You know, if you extend your arms out sideways, that's your height. And the limbs are organized in a funny way where you have, you know, the upper arm, for instance, it's one long bone. You know, force is transmitted along through that one plane. And then two bones of the forearm, which means they can rotate, and then 26 bones in the hands, which means that as the limb extends further out, it becomes more differentiated. You know, there's greater range of directions and places that you can extend. Well, the spine has the head on top of it, and the head has 22 bones. And if you include the bones of the inner ear, the vestibular apparatus, it makes it 28 bones. So it becomes more differentiated as we extend as well. And it differentiates in a different way. You know, we manipulate the foot and the hands differently from the way we manipulate the head. The way the head articulates is by opening and closing, because the joints are, you know, they're knitted together in this beautiful way, but they don't move much, but there is this sort of pulsing that goes on. And remember that the head contains the brain, the most spectacular bit of machinery in the known universe for us. And it's floating in this ocean of fluid that circulates through the skull and down into the spine. It's the most amazing structure. And today we're going to look at one of those bones. We're going to, in particular in the skull, we're going to look at the temporal bone. It's an amazing bone. We're going to look at the steering wheel for up, because our body is organized with gravity in mind. You know, if we go into space, we start to have problems with our body. And you know, we need that pressure. And so we have this pressure that's pushing us down 6,000 kilometers into the center of the earth. And then our body's designed for it, and we extend away. We extend away out in towards space. How do we know what up is? Could you point up? Point up with your fingers and just look at where everyone is pointing. And notice that everybody has a different sense of where up is. You know, it's either slightly to the left or to the right, or it's dead in the middle. You know, it's a different thing. And you know, when we're just looking at our finger pointing up, it's one thing. But if you're calculating, you know, the trajectory in order to launch a rocket off to land on an asteroid, you know, the slightest variation can make a huge difference. So where up is really important, because actually the balance of our skull on top of our spine is as delicate as the calculations needed to make to launch a spaceship in the right direction. It's so incredibly complicated, the balance here, that we can't do it consciously. We can only allow it to happen. It's a curious thing. The skull sits on top of the spine here. Put your hands there, feel that, just underneath your ears here. You can feel at the back of your fingers here, there's a bumpy bit. That's a bone. It's called the mastoid process. It's the temporal bone, the back of that. And directly, you know, above here, that's the point, or in between here, that's where the skull sits on top of the spine. Maybe, actually, I'm going to share my screen, and we'll look at some pictures of this. Where are you there? Temporal bone. So, I should get rid of it. rid of some of this clutter here. Except it didn't want to get rid of the temporal bone. It's all right. I'll just have to persevere. Here, these two little bumps there and here, that's what the skull sits on top of the spine. And notice that they're curved. So we rock backwards and forwards here. Our head rocks. It tips forward and then it comes up. And it tips forward because the center of gravity is in front of the point of this support where it sits on the spine. It's up here. It's in the temporal bone, and it's right where the vestibular apparatus is, or the semicircular canals. There's three little spirit levels that give us all our information about balance. But so it sits here, so you can feel that with your fingers, the point where it's supported, but the center of gravity is, more up here, just in front of the ear, and it's in front of that part where, it goes down and becomes the inside the body, the space inside the body. So here, this is the temporal bone here, the side. So the inner ear is about, it's in here. And the point of support is there. So the occipital bone, that's the floor of the skull, the base of the skull, along with the temporal bone, and the bone we're going to look at next week, which is in the male, the sphenoid bone. And then up here we have the frontal bone, our forehead. So this is the skull case. This is the parts of the brain here: frontal bone, sphenoid, temporal, and the occipital. And of course there's two other bones missing here. That's the parietal bone. There's two of them. The joint comes down to here and it goes right down to the side and articulates here. And that's the cranial skull, and that contains the nervous system. And in the front here, which we're going to explore in coming weeks, you have these other bones down here, 14 bones in the face. But this is the point of balance here. It's a really interesting thing to sense it. Notice that there's from below you have muscles of the spine that connect along these lines along here, and then connect down onto the neck and onto the spine. And when you feel with the back of you can't feel the occiput down in here because it's the muscle and fascia is so dense around there, and with good reason too, because we don't want to be getting our fingers in here and destabilizing our head. So when you're feeling the back here, you're feeling this mastoid process. So hold on to that and just feel where that is. Notice here, it's a little bit like Triceratops. See, we've got this, it's part of the cheekbone. You can reach in front of your ear here, and if you go forward, you can feel, if you keep your fingers still and you move it slowly, you can feel this joint here in the cheekbone. And you can get a sense if you move your head around, fingers around the sides of your head, where these sutures are. So we're going to do a bit of this today in the lesson, up the back, up here, and feel around the side. And this is interesting too, just before I switch images. Notice it's full of these little bumps and concave bits. All of these bumps and these lines, they all have a purpose. All these little ridges and things. So, the meninges or the various structures of the brain sit inside these structures here. And the temporal lobe's pretty interesting. It's, there's one part in there, people, if you put an electrode, you stimulate it, or if someone gets a lesion in there, they often have profound mystical experiences. so where they find God, or they're given some sort of tremendous insights. And some people have said, oh, well, that just means that mystical experiences are, it's just something, it's a figment of the brain. But V.S. Ramachandran, the famous neuroscientist, he says, well, maybe it's actually just a tuning mechanism for some sense of the divine, or connectivity, or whatever it is. It's a really interesting thing, this importance of the temporal bone, which means time. Why is it called time? Why does this bone here relate to time? Well, it certainly relates to balance, which is a movement, a constant movement with our head. Because that's what I didn't say, that the point of support is there, the center of gravity is here, which means that the weight of the head's always falling forward. So head balance is a constant movement. It's going up and down like this constantly, but it happens so quickly because the muscles are so delicate that control it, that you can't possibly do it. You can only allow it to happen. And it's at the heart of our ability to lengthen. In fact, let's just do this before, just to look at the parietal bone. Here's the frontal bone. Notice it forms part of the sockets of the eyes. And notice this suture at the back. So we're going to feel these sutures. Could you put your hands on your forehead here and just move it back, and move it slowly. You've got to keep your fingers still. You move it back till you can feel there's a bumpy bit. And you can feel this suture. It's called the suture, or the division, the joint between the two bones here. Trace it. Move along and feel that bumpy little bit of bone there. And now go to this one here, the parietal bone. Notice that it sort of feel this one here, parietal bone, along between. Feel the division between the two bones, and it comes right down to a sort of a point. And then if you look at the back, it's where it meets the occipital bone. You've got this Y shape, and then comes down here and then joins into the temporal bone. So, where is the top of the head? That's what we're going to be exploring today. It's this arc that the head moves through. It's sitting on those little bones, and it's doing this tiny little wobbling up and down like this. It's interesting. I was talking to a stonemason yesterday, not yesterday, on Friday, and he was remembering when in the olden days, they'd be throwing bricks up to someone on another floor. You get a delivery of bricks and they'd throw them up and someone would catch them. And if you're up on the next floor and you're catching the bricks, the moment when the brick stops, in fact, I'll stop, let's leave this. Stop the share. Great. The moment when the brick stops, it's weightless. As soon as it's going up, it has momentum. As it's coming down, it has momentum. And so you can feel its weight. But if you can take the brick at the moment when it's poised, it's weightless. And our head, I think, works in the same way. It's moving forward and up. And it's that point in the middle, when it's there, that you get this sense of everything being able to lengthen. It's the same in the pelvis, the same right through the body and through the curves in the spine. It's this keeping everything in the middle. As soon as that happens, everything can relax and you get this sense of lengthening. And what is that lengthening? It's actually it's not lifting, because it's a tiny movement we're talking about here, but it's all the muscles holding the spine release, and then you get this experience of the fluid. The buoyancy of the spine. That's the thing that gives this sense of lift or expansion. So keep your fingers still during this lesson. Each week we're going to explore a different one. Next week we're going to do this sphenoid bone. I've got a great class. I just came up with the idea for that yesterday. But today, could you come and sit down? Sit down on the ground. Oh, yes, you'll need a bit of wall for today. You'll need a little bit of wall to lean against. Lovely. So sit here on the floor, or on a chair if it's too uncomfortable to be on the floor. And just take a moment to tune in and bring your attention to the experience of your body. A sense of space within you. Maybe as you begin to relax, you may feel your breathing. And have a sense of the symmetries or asymmetries in the way you feel. You know, if your legs are crossed, one may be in front of the other one, well, that makes a bit of a difference. Maybe one shoulder or one side of your rib cage feels more present. Maybe you use that one more. Features more prominently in your awareness. And notice your ears. Your ears. And the ear canals that sit within the temporal bones on each side of your head. Now notice the distance between each sitting bone, notice the distance between your ears and the floor. Notice the distance between your ears and the floor, each ear and the floor. Do they feel different? If you would draw a line from each ear down to the floor, does one seem longer? And even more interestingly, where do those lines go? Where are you feeling the line? Where does it touch the floor? From each ear. I'm noticing mine now. It's actually more toward the front of my pelvis, because sitting cross-legged like this, for various reasons, I'm a bit tight. The muscles are a bit tight on the inside of the leg, so I'm feeling the front of the pelvis more. So I'm spontaneously tending to think from the ear, on the ear canal, down to the front of the pelvis. But of course, that's not directly down. That means I'm already out of balance. could you put your fingers or your hands, sit on your hands? If you're on a wooden floor, maybe put it just next to, but you can feel your sitting bones. So you're sitting on your hands there, or just next to that, and sense, that's directly down. Not the front of the pelvis or the back or somewhere else. From your ears down to the sitting bones is directly down and toward the center of the earth. Consider that now, the two lines from each ear down to each sitting bone. And that's an interesting thing, to sense your breathing here. And to notice, what's the feeling through your body between your ears and your sitting bones. Let yourself be exactly where you are. But notice, do you feel twisted over to one side or well, spread your attention now, even though you may feel twisted over to the left, say, which probably means that you're more aware of the front of the right side of your torso and pelvis. If you feel twisted over to the left, or you may feel more on the back, well, sense the back of the right side of the pelvis then. Sense the parts of your body away from whatever twists you feel, if there are any. And just notice them. How they move as you breathe. And then consider, where is the crown of your head? Where is up? If your head was going to extend, if we're going to lift up into space, we're going to float off the ground, which part of the head would lift first? Which part of the head would be leading? And remember that the head balances on top of the spine, just below the ears there, but the center of gravity of the skull is just in front of that. It's closer to where your the front fork of the jaw, just in front of the ears. So the head is constantly moving. It's tipping a little bit forward, and then it's lifting up. It's this constant arc, forward and back. And if you're going to be lifting up into space, it's probably going to be that part that's going to lift. And it's going to be moving as you're lifting. Nothing is ever static in our body. It's constantly moving. And that's the interesting question too. If the center of your head is this, is slightly in front of the point of the support, where's the center of your pelvis? In relation to your sitting bones. Where's the center of your rib cage? Well, turn yourself, considering those three things: the center of the rib cage, pelvis, and the center of your head, sitting over each other. And then leave that. And come up to stand. Come up to stand and find a bit of wall. You'll need a bit of wall. Just stand here and consider, where is the center of the head, crown of the head? And where is the center of your pelvis? Center of the rib cage. And could you place the crown of your head on the wall? Bend over and place your head gently against the wall. You notice, where is it sitting? There's two bones at the side of the head, parietal bones. Just roll your head slowly side to side. Roll your head slowly side to side. That means, the whole of your torso will move a little bit to enable this to happen. And just a comfortable distance. Can you feel the joint between those two parietal bones? Roll over it. Get a sense of the shape of your head. And maybe take your hands, place them underneath your ears, so you can feel that bumpy bit at the base of the skull, the temporal bone there. And just notice the depth of the head from top to bottom. And as you're rolling your head around the top, feeling the shape of the top of your head, how the base of your head is moving. And then leave that. Come away from the wall. Just stand there. Notice how that is. Could you place your hands on your forehead? Place your hands on your forehead. That's the frontal bone. Feel that here. And keeping your fingers still. In other words, you keep them still and slowly move them back so that you can feel the joints between the frontal bone and the two parietal bones. And just feel that joint right across the top of the head. Comes out to almost just the beginning of the temples there. And then come to the top again, to the center, and feel that the joint between the two parietal bones, the two bones at the side of the skull, and how that extends back, over the top of the head, comes to a little point, and then it splits out to the side, where you come to the bone at the back of your head, the occipital bone. Just feel that slowly. Get a sense of those joints between there. Yeah. Lovely. And now place your head on the wall again, the top of your head. And this time roll it up and down. So you roll, you arch your back and you round your back, or you could bend your legs a little bit. Depends how close or far away you are from the wall. But feel that moment where you're rolling over the parietal bones, the two bones at the side of your head, and you come to the bumpy bit that is the frontal bone, the forehead bone. And stay at the forehead bone, the bumpy bit, and roll side to side along that joint. Along the joint between the frontal bone and the two parietal bones. The top of your head. Where is that? Come back to rolling up and down again, thinking, where is the top of your head? It's a little bit behind the frontal bone. It's around that place when we're babies. We have one of the fontanelles, a really soft part. And the bones remain soft there to enable the brain to continue growing when we're freshly out of the womb. And it's right near where the center of gravity is of the skull, or at the top of the head. Or come away from the wall again, just stand there and just notice that, the top of the head, the shape of the top of the head. And think where the top of the head is. You know, the roundness of the top of the head, and then think of the roundness of the pelvic floor. You know, where's the center of the pelvic floor? You know, to be upright, everything needs to be lined up. Well, come back to the wall. This time have the back of your head against the wall. The back of your head against the wall. Yeah. And so now the bone at the back of your head is the occipital bone. If you roll your head slowly side to side, you can feel little bumpy bits on your head. It's not smooth. It's got all these little contours and bumps and grooves that different anatomical structures attach to. And as you roll to the side, you'll feel one sort of bump that's actually a joint between the bones at the side of the head, parietal bones, and the occipital bone. Feel that. See if you can feel that joint there. And we're looking at the underside of the skull here. Place your fingers underneath your ears. Hold on to underneath your ears. You've got that bumpy bit at the back. That's the temporal bone. That's next to the occipital bone. And if you have your fingers, you know, say your third finger just in front of the ear on the beginning of the temporal bone, the beginning of the cheekbone, I should say, that's part of the temporal bone. So as you're rolling your head side to side, the back of your head, that's the occipital bone, but you're holding on to the temporal bone, which is next to it. So this is the base of your skull. You know, your brain is sitting on this. In that book, The Phantom Limb by V.S. Ramachandran, he argues that the connectivity between the 10 billion neurons in our brain, you know, the number of potential brain states, that's the particular neurons that are on or off or connected or not, the number of possible brain states is greater than the number of elementary particles in the universe. It's the most staggering piece of equipment that we all have. So think, the brain is sitting on the base of the skull here that you're holding, and you think the flatness of the base of your skull. And the spinal cord, which extends from the brain through the spine, right down to the sacrum. And then from the spine, the nerves extend out through all the structures in the body. And we're oriented to the world via our senses. And you are holding on to the occipital bone here, which is related to hearing. And in fact, all the bones relate to hearing because bone is a better conductor of sound than air. And in fact, if you just bump your sacrum against the wall, notice that you can feel that. You can hear it. Or there's a sense of the sound of that movement. And that's because the bone, it makes a sound, and that sound passes through resonant cavities into the body. And inside the mouth, you have the eustachian tube that goes directly to the eardrum. So we're picking up sounds through all the bones and the resonant structures of our body, and it's being processed, via within the brain, but through the temple here. Now let your hands down. Continue rolling your head. Have your pelvis away from the wall. And now notice from the base of the skull down into your body, what's happening through the muscle. You're rotating your head and your pelvis and your rib cage. What are they doing? How are they sitting there? Maybe roll your head a little bit further. So you roll your head a little bit further, you move over the parietal bone, you go onto the temporal bone on the side. And maybe roll right around. Can you roll around sideways onto the front of your head, onto the frontal bone? And just roll the frontal bone over your forehead here. Feel the bumps on each side. What's the shape of your head? Can you remember the positioning of the back of the head, where it is? Well, keep rolling. Roll right around onto the back, and then roll around again, back onto the front. You can continue. You can just sort of walk around, rolling your head on the wall and just getting a sense of the size of your skull, the skull case. And think, as you're doing this, you want to keep your head still so that you can tune in, which means keeping the rest of your body soft. So your head isn't sliding around on the wall, it's just gently rolling. And maybe you could imagine you're like my anatomy app, where you can light up parts of your body. So as you roll over part of your head, well, imagine a light that will extend all the way down, lights up all the parts of your body below that. And stay with your head on its side. Stay with your head on, say, the left side. And just notice how this is. Your head's tilted over to the left. How your body is organized, how your neck is bent, weight on your feet. And now roll your head slowly, just a little bit, on the side. Feel you're rolling over the temporal bone and the parietal bone here too. And feel how all the muscles in your neck are turning and what you feel right down to your feet. And keep your head there. And now turn your body. Keep your head still. Keep your head still and now turn your body. So you're lying on the side of your head and now you're rotating your body. See, how can you do this so that your head doesn't wobble about? And how can you move that smoothly? You really have to focus on how you shift the weight on your feet smoothly. You can allow everything to be soft. Nice. And then leave that. Just come up to stand. Notice how that side feels. And your capacity to stand on that left foot. Hold on to the base of your skull again. One finger under the ear, one finger on the bumpy bit at the back of the temporal bone, and one finger just at the beginning of your cheekbone there. So you're holding on to the temporal bone there. And once again, place the side of your head on the wall. Yeah. And just notice the base of your skull here. Think the brain and spinal cord, where they are. Moving as you're breathing. And now roll your head up and down here on its side. So you're moving the base of the skull toward the wall and then away from the wall. And notice the shape of the sides of your head. Do it with your breath. And the more stillness you create, the easier it becomes. Nice. You don't stay with your head down and now roll the head side to side. A different part of the side of the head you're feeling. You're rolling. There's more a sense of the temporal bone here and the forehead. And then come up and roll over onto the other side, still holding on to the base of your neck. And just standing here, holding on to your temporal bone, with your hands, roll your head side to side. And notice how it is on this side. Rolling your head in time with your breath. Let's say you're standing on a platform in space somewhere, and you're having to juggle a whole lot of things, and your head is pressed against this thing that enables you to do whatever you're doing, but you can still, you need to keep doing that, but you can look around. You can move your body, but still keep the sense of the head being still and focused on what you're doing, even when you're in the middle of space, in the air. And now, roll your head once again. Oh, I'm sorry. And now keep your head still, but move your body. Turn your body around. Walk yourself around, keeping the side of your head still against the wall, moving yourself smoothly that you don't interrupt the contact with the wall. Which means you have to be relaxed, means your breathing needs to be soft to maintain this. And then leave that, come back and just stand here. Sense your contact with the floor and your feet and sense of your head. Yeah, the shape of your head. And the feeling of the space inside your head and down into the spinal cord. And once again, place your head on the wall. And just roll it around. You could place the top of the head on the wall. You could roll right around in a circle on the top of the head. Sensing the shape, the roundness and you could roll around, so roll around the head again. So you roll around the forehead and onto the back of your head, around the sides. And just notice, how does that feel now? Is it a little bit easier to move smoothly? It's certainly much easier if you can breathe softly. You can feel all the little bones in the skull. And then leave that, come back to stand. And then walk a little bit and just notice, how it is when your head is free like this, or when you're more aware of your head. And then come back down onto the floor. Lie down on your back on the floor. See what's the feeling inside you now. And you could roll your head slowly side to side. With your breath. And notice, in fact, place your hands, place your hands underneath your pelvis, palms down. So that they're on either side of the sacrum. So, and you have the wings of the pelvis, you can feel the pressure there, but you can sense the sacrum in the middle. And now the sacrum and the occipital bone, they both connect to the spine, and they're a similar shape. pointed at one end. Different, of course, they have different functions, but they're connected. And as you're rolling your head now, consider the width of the occipital bone and the width of your sacrum. And you may remember, as you roll your head to the side, you'll feel a bit of a bumpy prominence at one stage. And, that's the connection between the occipital bone and the parietal bone at the side. Feel that when you get to the joint between the occipital bone and the parietal bone. If you go a little bit further, you come down onto the temporal bone. And remember, the temporal bone is that bumpy bit that you can feel behind your ears, the base of the skull. It forms the side of the base of the skull. Along with another bone that we'll explore next week, the sphenoid. But now, leave that for a moment. Consider your breathing and the center of gravity of your skull. Remember, that's in front of the point where it's supported on the spine. And consider the center of gravity of your pelvis. So, center of gravity of your head, center of gravity of your pelvis. Now the center of gravity of your rib cage. And let's roll your pelvis up and down a little bit, tiny movement. And feel, that your head moves too. You roll your pelvis up and down, your head and your rib cage also move. So notice the center of gravity. Your head, your pelvis, and your rib cage. And then leave that. Keep your hands under your pelvis. And then lift one knee up, stand the foot on the floor, and then the other knee up, stand the foot on the floor. And do that a few times, up and down. And feeling first of all, in the pelvis, the feeling of the legs bending, the movement in the hips. You've got the big bony wing of the pelvis, and then you've got the hip and the leg. And between each bony wing of the pelvis, you have the sacrum. Feel how as you lift one leg, the pelvis rotates a bit, and how the sacrum rotates a bit. How the spine rotates a bit. Maybe how your rib cage rotates a bit. And of course, how your neck rotates a bit. So the feeling at the base of the skull as you lift one leg up and then the other one. And then take your hands out, rest there for a moment. Sensing the width of your sacrum, width of your pelvis. Width of your rib cage. And width of the sacrum, width of the occipital bone, the back of the head. And then the width of the head itself. So once again, place your hands underneath the ears. Hold on to, one finger under the ear, one holding on to the bottom of the mastoid process, that bumpy bit at the back of the head, and one in front of the ear at the beginning of the cheekbone. Once again, lift your knees up and down and get a sense of the influence of this movement on the base of the neck, the base of the skull, right around the base of your skull. Because you've got the spine directly below the ear there, and all the muscle in the back directly underneath the mastoid process, the bumpy bit at the back of your head. And you've got the airway underneath the cheekbone there, right down into the pelvis. And as you're lifting one leg up and the other, and then letting them down, you can feel this rotation right through the body and right through the whole neck, up to the whole head. And the next time you you have your head up, leave it there. Leave your knees up there. Next time you have your knees up, leave them there. Let your arms relax, still in this position. Tune into your breathing. And now roll your head slowly side to side. Yeah. Feeling the width of the occipital bone. Now you roll over slowly and you come to the parietal bone. If you go a little bit further, you come to the temporal bone. And the feeling of that right down into your pelvis. Right down into your pelvis. Lovely. And then leave that. Let your hands down for a moment, but keep your knees up. Interesting, you could probably still feel the sensation of your hands holding onto the occipital bone there. The sensation of the side of your head. Listening through the side of your head, through your ears. And now press down on one foot, raise that hip, and then let it down, and then press down on the other foot and raise that hip. And feel as you roll your pelvis side to side, the effect you feel right through your body up to your head. As if you were able to, you had a string, like some sort of a violin string or something that was strapped around your pelvis and extended up into the sky and connected with a sphere in the sky. The Greeks used to talk about the harmony of the spheres. Imagine if you had a string that went up into the sky and it played this cosmic string, this exquisite sound that you could hear through your ears. Well, actually, you'd feel it through your whole body, but notice that as you're rolling your pelvis and making this glorious sound. That you're picking it up through the ears, the bones at the sides of your head. There's that fabulous movie Lacho Drum. Actually, I had a clip from it in my last email, and there's a gypsy character in there has a bit of string that he's around his violin, around one of the strings, and he can pull this bit of string, and it's like a bow. But from a distance, it would look like he's just moving his hand and he's playing the violin. Think that now with this movement of your pelvis, you're creating a sound. And you can luxuriate in that sound through your ears and through your whole body. Now, could you place your hands on the bottom of your ears and the bumpy bit at the back of the head, on the beginning of the cheekbone, feeling the temporal bone here, the base of your skull. Continue rolling your pelvis. And you could roll your pelvis over, roll yourself over now onto your stomach, holding onto your head, and then over onto your back again. You have to lift your head up, of course, but you're rolling right around your pelvis and rolling, sensing that movement, the shape of the pelvis and the shape of your head. This whole cylinder of our body. And of course, you still have that string attached to the cosmic violin or whatever, the cosmic sphere or whatever the instrument is. Feel as the string pulls on that instrument, the vibration of it. It's the tension of it, and feel the sound resonating right through the whole body. So right around the pelvis, right around your head, around your rib cage, base of your head, the base of your pelvis. That's lovely. And then leave that. Come back down onto your back and rest there. You know, the space inside your skull. The ocean of the cerebrospinal fluid that the brain and spinal cord sit within, float within. And the universe within your entire body. You know, so sense the center of gravity of your skull. You know, is it easier to position that now? Center of gravity of your rib cage. And your pelvis. Well, now roll onto your side and come up to stand. Roll onto your side and come up to stand. Notice the way you feel. Eyes on the horizon, closed. And so you can sense temporal bones. Maybe hold them one more time. Fingers under the ear, bumpy bit at the back of the head and the front of the cheekbone. So you sense the volume inside your skull and spine and the size of the whole crane case, cranial skull, shape of your skull. Center of gravity of your head, chest and pelvis. And then when you're ready, walk. And notice how it feels, you know, when your head can move freely on top of the spine. And you've found the steering wheel for up.